There is a low building on Eagleville Road in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, a suburb without ceremony, the kind of place you drive through on your way somewhere else. From the road, the facility gives nothing away. A flat-fronted, 240,000 square foot structure sitting on unremarkable commercial land about 25 miles northwest of Philadelphia. Nothing about it suggests that something important happens inside. But walk through those doors, and the first thing you notice is that the people here don't talk about flashlights the way a marketing department would. They talk about what happens when light fails. A firefighter disoriented in a smoke-blackened hallway. A patrol officer making a traffic stop at 2 in the morning on a rural highway. A paramedic trying to find a vein on a stretcher in the back of a moving ambulance. These are the moments Streamlight engineers when they sit down to design a product. Not the shelf, not the box, the moment. Right now, there are Streamlight lights on the duty belts of law enforcement officers in all 50 states. There are Streamlight weapon-mounted lights on firearms carried by military units in 67 countries. There is a Streamlight right-angle light clipped to the shoulder strap of turnout gear being worn by a firefighter who is, at this very moment, somewhere inside a burning building. The company that made all of those things started with engineers trying to build a portable sun for NASA. That is where this story begins. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. In the early 1970s, NASA had a problem. The Apollo program was testing equipment that needed to perform in conditions no one could fully replicate on Earth, including the unfiltered light of the sun as it exists in the vacuum of space. Beyond the atmosphere, sunlight doesn't diffuse. It arrives at full intensity, hard and direct, and it interacts with materials in ways that filtered Earth surface light doesn't reveal. NASA needed a way to simulate that. A group of engineers set up a laboratory in Fairfield, New Jersey, and went to work. What they built was extraordinary. A lighting system that produced 25 million candle power, enough concentrated light to simulate the sun itself, stripped of atmospheric softening. Think about that number for a moment. A standard household bulb produces perhaps 100 candle power. The engineers in Fairfield were building something 250,000 times more powerful. The space program got what it needed. But the engineers had learned something in the process that didn't belong to NASA. They had learned how to push light to extremes, how to drive halogen technology past every civilian limit that had existed before. And sitting in Fairfield with that knowledge, someone asked the obvious question: what else could this do? The answer they arrived at was not complicated. They took what they had learned building a 25 million candle power solar simulator and applied it to something a person could hold in one hand. The result was a handheld unit that produced 1 million candle power, a beam that could reach out over a mile in the dark. Nothing like it had ever been offered commercially. They began selling it to the military and to law enforcement. A private investor from the Philadelphia area named Harry French saw what this technology could become. In 1973, he moved the operation to King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and incorporated it. The name he gave it was Streamlight. To understand what made Streamlight different from every other flashlight company that existed in 1973, you have to understand what those other companies were actually making. Flashlights in the early 1970s were, with almost no exceptions, a consumer product. They were designed for the kitchen drawer, the power outage, the camping trip. They ran on D-cells. They used incandescent bulbs that burned hot and burned out. They were stamped and molded and sold on price. The entire category existed at the cheap end of hardware, and no one was losing sleep over whether it was good enough for a professional. Streamlight came at the problem from the opposite direction entirely. The engineers who built the NASA solar simulator were not thinking about hardware stores. They were thinking about what light needs to do under conditions that matter. And they understood that the answer to that question was almost always more than any consumer product on the market had bothered to provide. From the beginning, Streamlight's customer was the professional, the officer walking a beat at midnight, the soldier who needed to clear a building, the firefighter who needed to see through smoke. And serving that customer meant building to a completely different standard than the one that governed everything else in the category. In 1975, Streamlight introduced the SL20. It was the first professional full-size rechargeable flashlight in the world, an aircraft-grade aluminum body, a halogen bulb, a nickel-cadmium battery pack, and a charging cradle designed to live in a police vehicle. You plugged it in when you got to the cruiser at the start of your shift. You pulled it out when you needed it. The batteries didn't die on you in the middle of a call because the light had been charging for the entire shift. That rechargeable cradle was a radical idea in 1975. Every other flashlight on the market asked a professional to manage batteries, to carry spares, to remember to replace them, to accept that at some point, during some call, the light was going to die. The SL20 said no. The SL20 said that a professional tool should be ready when you reach for it, every single time, without the professional having to think about it. Police departments noticed. The SL20 did not go into hardware stores. It went directly into law enforcement channels, department by department, agency by agency. Officers tried it and told other officers. Departments that issued it found they were spending far less on disposable batteries.
And the light itself, the actual beam, was brighter and more reliable than anything the patrol car door had held before. By the 1980s, Streamlight had moved its headquarters to Norristown, Pennsylvania, and was expanding its product line methodically. Right-angle lights for firefighters, lightbox lanterns for scene illumination, miniaturized pen lights, each product built around the same central principle. Figure out exactly what the professional needs, then build the tool that provides it. But the company was also watching something happen in its primary market that most manufacturers would have found disorienting. The very officers who carried Streamlights were telling the engineers what was wrong with them, not in product review forms, in person. Streamlight made a deliberate practice, one that continues today, of sending its engineers and product developers into the field. They rode along in patrol cars. They went through fire academy training. They spent time in the environments where the products actually lived. What they heard in the 1980s and into the early 1990s was a consistent version of the same request: smaller. The SL20 was a full-size duty light, substantial, powerful, designed to fit a specific holder on a specific vehicle. It was the right tool for what it was designed to do. But officers were also working in environments where a full-size light was awkward. Plainclothes work, confined spaces, situations where a long aluminum cylinder in your hand was a liability rather than an advantage. The answer was the Stinger. Introduced in 1994, the Stinger was Streamlight's first compact-duty flashlight, a rechargeable light small enough to carry on a belt in a standard holster, powerful enough to throw a beam that officers could rely on, and rugged enough to survive the routine abuse of daily professional use. It was not a compromise. The Stinger did not sacrifice brightness for size. It found a way to deliver both. The original Stinger produced 20,000 candle power, in a body a fraction of the size of the SL20, with a runtime measured in hours, not minutes. And like every Streamlight product before it, it was rechargeable. It lived in a cradle in the patrol vehicle and was ready every time an officer reached for it. The Stinger became the standard, not by advertising, not by marketing, by officers putting it in their hands and finding that it worked the way a professional tool should work. Departments that issued the SL20 began transitioning to the Stinger. Departments that had never issued Streamlights before evaluated the Stinger and adopted it. The waiting lists were real. The endorsements came from people who staked their safety on the equipment they carried. There is a detail about the Stinger's success that deserves to sit with you for a moment.
When law enforcement departments ran the numbers on the switch to rechargeable streamlights, they found that the cost savings were extraordinary. A single rechargeable streamlight light, over its service life, eliminated the need to purchase hundreds of disposable batteries, an estimated 62% cost reduction over the lifetime of the product. One rechargeable battery used 1,000 times, replacing 1,000 sets of alkaline cells that would have ended up in the landfill. Streamlight was not selling this to departments as an environmental argument. They were selling it as a budget argument. Police departments run on tight budgets. Equipment purchasing decisions have to be justified. The Stinger justified itself on a spreadsheet before it ever had to justify itself in the field. But here's what's interesting about that combination: the cost argument and the performance argument arriving together. It meant that the people holding the checkbooks and the people holding the flashlights were both pulling in the same direction. That alignment is rarer than it sounds. Most of the time in equipment procurement, the people who make the budget decisions and the people who use the equipment are at odds. Streamlight had built a product where the answer to "can we afford it?" and the answer to "will it work?" were the same answer: yes.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The year 2004 is where this story takes a turn. Not a turn like the one that hit Maglite, not a scandal, not a technology shift that the company missed. Something different, something that would have ended a lesser company. While Streamlight was building its law enforcement reputation through the SL-20 and the Stinger, a completely separate revolution was underway in the tactical world. Special operations units, the teams that conduct hostage rescues, counter-terrorism raids, the operations that happen in darkness by design, were pushing the limits of what weapon-mounted lighting could do. The problem was not simply brightness. The problem was that a firearm is not a flashlight platform. It moves, it recoils, it gets dropped and dragged and thrown into vehicles and pulled back out again. A light mounted to a weapon has to survive everything the weapon survives, and it has to stay zeroed, aimed where the weapon is aimed, through all of it. The lights that existed before Streamlight entered this space were unreliable. They failed under recoil. They came loose from the rail. They were not built for what was being asked of them. In the early 2000s, Streamlight introduced the TLR-1. It was the company's first aluminum rail-mounted weapon light, a compact, self-contained unit that clamped directly to the accessory rail of a firearm and stayed there. It was designed from first principles around the question of what weapon-mounted light actually needed to do: survive the mechanical violence of a firearm in use, hold its zero, deliver consistent output, and activate reliably with one hand in the dark. The TLR-1 did all of those things. The military noticed. Law enforcement units noticed. And from that single product, the TLR series grew into one of the most trusted families of weapon lights ever produced. TLR-1, TLR-2 with integrated laser, TLR-7, TLR-8, and a full range of configurations for full-size handguns, compact pistols, and long guns. Military units in 67 countries today issue Streamlight weapon lights as standard equipment. Think about that number for a moment. 67 countries. The engineers in Fairfield, New Jersey, who built a solar simulator for NASA in the early 1970s, could not have imagined that the technology they were developing would end up on firearms carried by Allied military forces on 6 continents. But the TLR line was not the only revolution happening at Streamlight in the 2000s. In 2001, the same year the company moved to its current home in Eagleville, Streamlight introduced the Stryon, the world's first ultra-compact rechargeable flashlight powered by a lithium-ion battery weighing 4.6 ounces and producing brightness that lights 5 times its size could not match. The Stryon said that rechargeable did not have to mean large. It said that the future of the professional flashlight was a tool that fit in a shirt pocket and still performed when it mattered. The LED transition came next, and here is where Streamlight's story diverges most sharply from Maglight's. When LED technology matured enough to challenge incandescent performance, Streamlight moved. Not reluctantly, not 5 years late. Streamlight had not built its identity around a specific light source. Its identity was built around performance for professionals. If a new technology performed better, the identity demanded that it adopt the new technology. The company's engineers were early adopters of high-power LEDs, integrating them into the Stinger series and then across the full product line. The result was not just brighter lights, it was lights that ran dramatically longer on a single charge, that could survive temperatures and impacts that incandescent bulbs could not, and that could be driven to outputs that halogen technology could never have reached in a duty-size package. The Stinger 2020, the current flagship of the line, produces 2,000 lumens. The original Stinger, in 1994, produced the equivalent of perhaps 20. The geometry of progress, made visible in a single product family across 3 decades. There is a question that sits underneath all of this that deserves an honest answer. Why did Streamlight succeed at something Maglite could not? They faced the same LED revolution, the same flood of cheap competitors, the same pressure from every direction. Maglite lost its empire. Streamlight grew. The answer is not that Streamlight was smarter or luckier or had better engineers. The answer is that the two companies were protecting entirely different things. Maglite was protecting a product, a specific product, the machined aluminum body, the incandescent beam, the weight and feel and presence of a thing that Tony Maglica had spent 30 years perfecting. When the technology inside that product became obsolete, the product became a problem. The thing that had been the company's greatest strength, the total control of a single founder over every detail of every flashlight, became the thing that slowed it down. Streamlight was not protecting a product. It was protecting a relationship. The relationship between the company and the professionals who used its lights. That relationship was built on a simple compact. We will build what you need to the standard you needed, and we will keep building better as better becomes possible. When LEDs became better, that compact demanded that Streamlight build LED products. When weapon-mounted lighting became a professional necessity, that compact demanded that Streamlight build weapon lights. The compact didn't care what the technology was, it cared about the outcome. That distinction, protecting a product versus protecting a relationship, is the whole story. Walk the Eagleville facility today and you find a company that has not forgotten where it came from, but has not been held hostage by it either. The 240,000 square foot building on Eagleville Road is Streamlight's headquarters and its manufacturing plant. The engineering and the assembly happen in the same building, not in separate facilities in separate states, not in a design center in one country and a factory in another. The engineers who design the products and the people who build them are a few hundred feet apart. When a firefighter sends feedback about a right-angle light that clips to turnout gear, that feedback doesn't get lost in a supply chain that stretches to the other side of the world. It gets to a person who can act on it. Over 525 US and foreign patents, 350 employees, products used by law enforcement, military, firefighters, industrial workers, and outdoor professionals in more than 90 countries. And the company's marketing director will tell you, without any hesitation, that none of that is the point. The point is the firefighter in the burning building. The point is the patrol officer on the dark highway. The point is the soldier making a decision in a fraction of a second in a space with no light. Streamlight's team trains with firefighters. They take low-light shooting courses. They spend time in the field because the products are designed for the field, and you cannot design for a place you've never been. That practice, the engineers getting out of the building, the products earning their place among people who stake their lives on their gear, is not a marketing strategy. It is the mechanism by which the company stays honest. It is how a company built on a relationship rather than a product keeps that relationship real.
There is one more thing worth saying about the Maglite story, because it does not end the way most people think. After the LAPD turned away from the large Maglite in 2004, and the LED revolution began reshaping the market, 1,000 police agencies that had carried Maglites made the same evaluation. Most of them chose a Streamlight. The rechargeable Stinger, the compact Streon, eventually the Pro Tax series for officers who preferred a non-rechargeable option. The departments that had once stocked Maglites stocked Streamlights instead, and the supply rooms of police facilities across the country gradually changed color. There is nothing triumphant about that sentence. Maglite is a company that kept its factory in California, kept its workers employed, kept its founder on the floor through his 90s. There is real honor in what Tony Maglica built and in the choices he made when the market turned against him. He protected his workers when the numbers said to abandon them. That is not a failure. That is a different kind of success, one that spreadsheets have never known how to measure. But the officers needed what Streamlight was building, and Streamlight had spent 30 years making sure it understood exactly what that was. Stand for a moment outside the Eagleville facility on a Tuesday morning and listen. Not a roar. Not the sound of a vast enterprise in motion. Something quieter and more deliberate than that. The low sound of machines doing careful work. Somewhere inside, an engineer is running a Stinger through a drop test. Somewhere else, a finished TLR-1 is being inspected before it ships to a department that will issue it to officers who will carry it every shift for the next several years. Somewhere, a right-angle light is being attached to a piece of turnout gear to confirm that it clips correctly, that it won't come loose when someone is crawling through debris in the dark. None of that is spectacular. None of it makes a particularly good photograph. But somewhere tonight, in a city you've never been to, on a street you'll never drive, there is a first responder walking toward a situation that is going to require them to see clearly in the dark. They are going to reach for the light on their belt, or the light on their weapon, or the light on their shoulder strap without thinking about it. The way you reach for the thing you've trusted so many times that you've stopped thinking about whether it will work. That light, in most of those hands, in most of those places, is going to be a Streamlight. It started with engineers in a New Jersey laboratory trying to build a portable sun for NASA. It survived every technology shift that ended other companies in its industry. It grew not by making the cheapest flashlight or the most recognizable one, but by making the one that professionals trusted with their lives, and then continuing to deserve that trust every time the technology gave them a reason to do it better. The low building on Eagleville Road looks like nothing from the road. Inside, they are still at work.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.